Hi, everyone. Welcome to Authenticity with Alicia, the podcast where we explore burnout, the pressures of society, and our quest for identity and authenticity. I'm Alicia, and today I'm so excited to be joined by one of my friends and colleagues, Kali Wolken. She's a licensed therapist and coach who also specializes in burnout, and she's really about empowering young professionals with their careers and mental health. So thank you so much for being here. Also, I just love your hair, by the way. I think we need to, like, for folks who are watching on YouTube, her hair is fire.
Quite literally, it's like orange and red, so it's fun. I
Yeah, it
do
makes
it
me
every
think of
once
all
in a
the like
while.
romantasy books that I've been reading right now. And I'm like, it's just very giving me
Mhm.
the good vibes.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, I am so excited to chat with you. We both overlap in a lot of our passions
Mhm.
and really respect your way of going about burnout. Something that, it makes me feel very comfortable referring folks to because I know sometimes people in the burnout field, we get messages of like, well, just self-care your way away. And you're very much about tackling like the real issues of burnout. So
Yeah.
can you share a little bit about why burnout is important to you?
Yeah. I mean, I think we probably fall in that same realm of that reason, but it almost comes down to my personal experience of burnout and how I've experienced that. And I had a supervisor in grad school who I think just really showed me what compassion in the
Mm,
midst of that burnout can look like.
mhm.
And so and it was literally her sitting down with me during one of those evaluative sessions going, "How are you doing?"
Like
No,
really, like
really.
how?
How are you doing? I don't think you should be doing the job you're doing right now at this other place because you're burnt out kind of conversation.
Yep.
And to have her speak for me, even as a grad student, and to see that was really powerful. And I ultimately want to be that person for other people. I want to be able to say, no, really, what's going on?
Yeah.
Let's get down to it here because it's not okay. Like I cannot stand the hustle and grind
Ugh.
culture that pushes us into burnout.
And
So
to get that message, I know like that's what gives me hope in a lot of these things. Like
yeah.
why, it empowers me to do what I do. And I think it empowers you to do what you do is like there are good people out there. And I think, in a
Mhm.
lot of fields, not everyone has that supervisor who's going to be like, hey, I know you're an achiever. I know you want to do good work. I know you're working really hard, but we need to like slow down and be real. And that doesn't make
Mhm.
you weak. Like, not everyone gets that message. And for you, it sounds like
Mhm.
that was a really powerful person to have in your corner to give you that space.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I still hustle and ground my way through the last 10 years and burnt out multiple times, but that was the first experience. So I do know how to tap back into that.
Well, and
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I mean, so many of us, if we are ingrained with the perfectionist hustle mentality that, a lot of the previous generations, like that's the messages that they got and passed down to us. One conversation is not going to change for many people, but it sounds like it planted a seed and allowed you to do a lot of the work and now get to help other people with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
What are some like factors that you think contribute to burnout? This is one of my favorite questions to ask.
Ugh. What doesn't contribute? So, my favorite metaphor in the world is talking about the idea of like a magician's water tank and how, if you imagine, like the water tank fills and you see them and you're like, oh no, they're gonna drown and all of that fun stuff. I have to add to the metaphor because this part doesn't exist, but I think that what happens is that we end up in this water tank where the water level just keeps rising and we have no way to let the water out
Mhm.
until we hit a point where we feel like we're drowning. And then it takes like a cup of water, a tablespoon of water, whatever it is. And then we're like, oh crap, like I can't do this anymore. Um, so to me, it's almost like burnout can be one big thing, but it can also be the death of a thousand cuts kind of thing too.
Mhm.
That at the end of the day, it's whatever the definition is. I know it begins with it's kind of unchecked stress.
Mhm.
And so if we're not dealing with the stress that exists that's feeding into that, that's where burnout comes out on the other end.
I love that metaphor. I've never heard of that one before, but I think it like gives a really powerful image of yes, like something big can happen and our body's going to have a
Mhm.
response to that. But for a lot
Mhm.
of people, it's these more like slow burns. and it's just
Yeah.
piling and piling. And at first we're like, okay, I got this. I got it. I still got room to breathe. And then all of a sudden it takes the tiniest
Fine.
thing. And we're like,
Mm-hmm.
why did I have a meltdown at the grocery store over cheese? Like, real story. I've done that
Right,
before. And it's
right,
because at
right.
the end, I'm not having as much free space in there
Yeah.
as I did in
Yeah.
the beginning when I'm like, "Psh, I got this. I got this."
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. Because yeah, like you say that about the cheese. I'm like, it could be, you turned your sock inside out and you
Yeah.
figured it out. It's just anything that you think about stress, it has levels. And so it's just that we've hit the point that we have no more room. If you want to talk about it in psychology terms, you can talk about things like the window of tolerance and how that window gets smaller and smaller and smaller based on what fills it up. And so it's that same idea that we lose the room to deal with stuff. And then
Yeah.
burnout is our body saying, I'm done.
Yeah.
I cannot anymore. And it goes back to, we got to get back to, what do we got to get out of our tank? What do we got to remove for ourselves to be able to breathe again?
Yeah.
Um,
So how do you help people find that like that
We,
space
yeah,
again?
yeah, we start with figuring out where the stress is coming from. Um, because again, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna give you some coping skills because we all love our coping skills, and to some degree, we need to learn how to swim in the tank that we're
Mhm.
drowning in.
Mhm.
But that is not a sustainable action. We
Yeah.
need to get the water down. We need to lower the stress. And I stick with that metaphor long term just because it fits in a lot of ways. Like I go, okay, let's say that there's buckets of water being dumped in that you don't need.
Yeah.
What are those buckets? How can we draw the boundaries or even just limit the flow? A good example, like a good practical example might be if the stress is coming from work and that a person is feeling overwhelmed because they're getting emails like day and night, and they get back from vacation and they have 182 emails to answer. And in that circumstance, I would say, listen, like, let's find a way for you to only respond to 5 emails
Mhm.
in the morning and 5 in the afternoon. And yeah, there's going to be a buildup there. We may need to pace it somehow if they're getting 20 a day or whatever. But the idea being, you can't push yourself to respond to the whole bucket. We either need to cut off the supply and say, hey, I'm not responding to emails that come in this week, or, I'm going to respond to them on top of my other work when I have time, like 5 beyond what I
Yeah.
need to respond to, or something
Yeah.
like that. So, yeah.
Sounds like a lot of like in like the therapist lingo. I guess it's like a buzzword these days too, but just like
Yeah.
boundaries, and it's
Yeah.
slowing things
100%.
down and prioritizing things and realizing like we can't do everything all the time. And so, okay, like
Hmm.
does my energy need to go to some of these tasks? And if so, okay, then the emails are gonna, slow down a little bit. Or hey, do you need me to do emails? Okay, but then these other
Hmm.
things are gonna slow down a little bit. Like we can't
Right.
do all the things
You
forever.
can't. No.
It's not
There's
sustainable.
literally only so much time in the day, and so you can't add a 25th hour to your day.
No,
So
no. And also, if I did, I don't think I would be spending it doing
I'd be
email.
sleeping. I'd be
Sleeping,
sleeping.
reading, so many other things besides emails.
Mhm.
But I love
Yeah.
that approach though of like, because I think a lot of my like clients may be similar where like they're coming to you in a space where like they're drowning. They need some survival
Yeah.
tools in that moment. So you're like, okay, we're gonna, learn how to swim a little bit. We're gonna get some of this, but then you're gonna go deep for that meaningful change. I think a lot of times
Hmm.
people want to slap a band-aid on it because that's what's maybe quick or easy. And I get it. I've slapped some band-aids on some of my problems before when I'm tired.
Hmm.
I don't got the time or energy.
Hmm.
But then I don't know if you've noticed this pattern and like people that it comes back eventually,
Hmm.
there's like
Yeah.
maybe they do something big, like they quit a job or they make these major life changes, but those patterns are still ingrained and then
Right.
burnout happens eventually. Do you ever see that in your work?
Yeah, yeah, I think it happens a lot of times with something like vacation. People
Mm,
think, oh, I took vacation, I'm good. And then they get, 2 weeks, maybe not even 2 weeks. They start on Monday and they're back in it feeling overwhelmed again.
yeah, yeah.
Um, and so I was I was thinking about this. It was probably a month ago, but I was watering my garden because I don't have a sprinkler out there, so I have to manually water it. And I was thinking about how if I were to just douse it in water
Mm.
and expect everything to grow for the rest of the summer, I would be called crazy. Because it needs daily watering. It needs daily consistent action of care for it to thrive. And I think as people, we need to look at ourselves the same way. We need daily actions. They don't have to be big things
No.
all the time. In fact, I think the little things are more helpful for us because they are doable.
Mhm.
Um, people are like, oh, I know I should exercise. I know I should do this. I know I should. Also, I don't
Oh, that
love shoulds,
should
but
language.
um, I'm like, I had a client once say, I was told never to should all over myself. And I was like, I'm gonna steal that.
Yeah,
And I told them.
that's one
I
that I
told them,
use.
yeah, yeah. And
Like, don't
so
shit on yourself
uh
right now.
yes. But I think sometimes it's even just being intentional about, you know what? Every single morning, the non-negotiable for my life is that I'm going to sit and drink a warm drink without
Mm.
doing anything else. And it may
Hmm.
take me 10 minutes, but that is all I do in those 10 minutes.
Yep.
And it becomes a mindfulness practice. It becomes a routine. It almost becomes like a sacred time for you to
Yeah.
just sit with that one thing,
Yeah.
you know?
And that seems more like you said, like sustainable, right? Like
Yeah.
burnout
Yeah.
happens because we, yeah, sure, we go on this fun vacation and maybe it gives us a little bit of energy, maybe it doesn't. But then, okay,
Mm-hmm.
we go back to those patterns. But if you're doing
Mm-hmm.
something, even if it's small, that means we're likely going to be able to have that habit. I may not be
Mm-hmm.
able to do a workout every 30 minutes every day or an hour a day, but I can
Mm-hmm.
take 10 to 15 minutes and just be, and that's going to
Mm-hmm.
give me a lot of energy and purpose
Mm-hmm.
throughout the day.
Yeah, I think of it like in that same metaphor of the water. It's like you're poking holes in the tank. The
Mm.
routines are the holes that let the water drain. We still need to cut off buckets, but that at least gives you some ways for the stress, the water level to go down
Yeah.
so that you have more room to. But it's hard because we want it to be like, give me this quick fix, give me vacation, and then I'll be fine.
Yeah.
And really all vacation is it's cutting off the water. It's
Hmm.
cutting off the stress supply for a moment, and that's why we feel better. But as soon as we get back in it, if we haven't dealt with it, it's just going to come right back in and fill us up again.
Yep. Yep. The water's still gonna flow. And I love that idea of like the poking the holes because it slows down the panic and the urgency of about to drown.
Hmm.
And so it's like, well, we need to
Hmm.
almost, I use like a cake metaphor where it's like we need to build the foundation.
Yeah. Hmm.
And, if we're
Yeah.
building I watch a lot of baking shows, and if you're building this tiered cake, what's the first thing they do is they build a really solid base that's going to hold everything you
Hmm.
put onto it. As much as I would love to burn it all down and like tackle these big systemic issues, if we're in
Hmm.
burnout, we're tired. We
Yeah.
are just pedaling along,
Yeah.
trying to survive. But if we can poke some
Hmm.
holes, get a little bit of like a wiggle room, well, then maybe I can set a
Hmm.
really tough boundary with my boss. Maybe then I can
Hmm.
challenge these people pleaser patterns or things like that. So
Hmm.
yeah, I love that approach that you do because it seems more just sustainable,
Yeah. Like
lasting.
the tiny habits, the little
Yeah.
steps kind of idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Hmm.
love that. So, like burnout isn't technically in the DSM. It's not technically, for some
Yeah.
of these insurance-based folks, like it's not covered by some of these things, but we know it's a very real thing. And
Hmm.
it also overlaps with a lot of other mental health things. And I think that's
Yeah.
something that I really like about your work is you integrate it into like it's not just burnout, it can lead to these other things as well. So
Hmm.
what's the relationship that you found between burnout and other of the more like traditional mental health
Yeah.
related things?
Yeah, it unfortunately looks a lot like depression for people. I think we want to think it looks like anxiety and I think that the stress and the overwhelm is the anxiety that drives us to the crash, but when you look at the definition of burnout, it talks about us feeling exhausted, ineffective, and cynical. Like those are all things that are more on the depression side of things. Um, and again, like it goes to when I'm working with people in depression, work, it becomes, okay, you can't lift 1,000 pounds right now. What's the one little step that we can take? So it has a very similar process of, yeah, we need to get you back to a place where you're moving and you're doing things that you feel proud of. But it's okay if the steps that you take right now are little steps because they're still moving forward. They're still caring for yourself. So I usually equate it to depression.
Mhm.
Um, I almost feel like even though we recognize depression, we feel like anxiety is more attractive to identify with.
I was just
Um,
thinking about this in the shower the other
yeah.
day.
Yeah, we're like, oh, that means that we're like doing and achieving, but
Yeah.
I think that it's hard because it's
Mhm.
probably more like depression.
I think you're spot on. No, I literally was having this thought of like, it's almost like sexy to have anxiety these days. And I deal with both. I
Hmm.
deal with anxiety and depression. And I have a very just like,
Yeah.
when one is high, the other is low. And then they like to switch
Hmm.
places and it ebbs and flows. But it's like my anxiety, and I think a lot of people's anxiety is almost like a motivating force. It gets me to
Hmm.
do things for better or worse.
Yeah.
It gets stuff done. It wants to make sure that I appear a certain way or I'm achieving certain things. Then I have a crash
Hmm.
and burn, and it can go into a really like lower place where then I'm helpless,
Hmm.
hopeless, don't have any energy to do anything. And it's just like we hear labels of lazy,
Hmm.
unmotivated. It has a lot more of this negative, stagnant space, but they
Hmm.
both are normal
Yeah.
and serve functions and are part of our processes.
Yeah. Yeah, I always remember that I don't remember where I saw it, like where the conversation happened, but I at least want to give a shout out to the people who have anxiety who do wish that they had depression instead, like because I have seen that because when we are in the space of anxiety that it's just like it's stopping us in our tracks, it's freezing us. That is to me also worth acknowledging that we're not like saying one is better than the other
No. And also
at all.
everyone's anxiety looks
Yeah.
different. Everyone's depression looks
Yeah.
different. But yeah, there is like a
Hmm.
subset of folks where it is more of like the high achieving perfectionist level where
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
motivating. There's also a side of
Hmm.
anxiety where it's debilitating.
Yeah.
It is
Hmm.
stuck. It is overwhelming and out of control.
Hmm.
So we see you too. We see you.
Yeah. Yeah, for
You are also
sure.
not immune from burnout
Mhm.
though. So get some
Right.
everyone can
100%.
can get some help.
Hmm.
Something that I love about your website is you use a lot of language. I'm a big language person about
Hmm.
loving what you do, having a
Hmm.
purpose,
Hmm.
valuing things. Why do you think that's important for our jobs or for what we do?
Yeah. Oh, such a good question. A lot of the work that I do with people, I talk about energy. Like not like I want to be clear, like not like spiritual energy or something like that, but physical
Mm-hmm.
energy where you're like, okay, I can get up this morning and walk through
Mm-hmm.
my day and all of that. And so a lot of the career work that I'll do with people actually focuses on there are things that we do or don't do that actually energize or drain us.
Mm-hmm.
And when we are in the realm of alignment of, I actually love what I do, that also means it takes the least amount of energy for us. And we tend to get payout in terms of
Mm-hmm.
energy. Um, and so I use a lot of language about you got to love what you do because it pays back into you in terms of energizing you and exciting you about life. And all of that also comes into play with purpose. Um, to me, purpose is us having like living out our identity. And so, and we have a clear sense of who we are and going back to that, what energizes us, what we love, when we are able to then live it out, it's like all of the pieces of the puzzle clicking together and us going, this feels right.
Yeah.
It would be like if you're, I don't know, if you're, this is going to sound funny. Uh, Not everybody runs, and I 100% understand this, but it is totally a running metaphor. Like if you are running and you just kind of like hit a step, like you hit a groove where you're like, I was so freaking tired like 2 miles ago. But at some point in the process, your body goes, okay, I got this. it feels a little bit better and you don't think so much about the work of it and you're just
Yeah.
kind of moving. I know
Yeah.
that that's a weird one, but it is a thing. And our brains do that with everything that we do. When we
Hmm.
hit the groove, we then are able to move in it with less effort. But
Hmm.
yet on the other side, we're feeling good. We're getting the hormones, right? We're getting the dopamine and the
Yeah.
serotonin and all of that stuff because we're accomplishing things in that moment too.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And I think there's like newer research. I've seen it in like the mental health world being used, but I think it's starting to be used in other
Hmm.
careers as well, of like the concept of flow. And I've seen a talk with like
Hmm.
when you're like when a therapist is with a flow client, it's exactly what you're describing. Like, yes,
Yeah.
it's work. Like being a therapist and listening and using all our therapy skills, it takes work. But it's also
Mhm.
it's when we're in that flow, it takes less work because we're not necessarily thinking as much. It's just we are vibing, we are in it, we are in this dance where we are just like
Mhm.
boom, boom, boom with our client. And
Yeah.
then we also feel good because we're like, man, that was such a great session. Like they just like
Mhm.
nailed it. And like we feel good.
Mhm.
Yes, it's still work, but it's not gonna like take as much out of that. When we're going back to that
Mhm.
metaphor that you're using, like it's not adding as much water to that thing. Maybe it's even like
Right.
taking some of that water out a little bit,
Yeah.
like more water is
Yep.
taken out than it's been put in. And so I think we can apply that to like a lot of other jobs of we're
Hmm.
not saying it's going to be perfect all the time. We're not saying it's never going to be stressful, but can you be in a flow and really get something
Hmm.
out of it? Like that's what our
Yeah.
brains are kind of wired to do.
Yep. Yeah. I think about like when you talk about the flow, my brain goes immediately to, the ocean and waves and tides and all of this. Like it's gonna sound funny, but the ocean is doing work when it's
Mhm.
putting the waves in. And if the waves were always going in, the tide would never move. It would be really strange. If we only ever saw waves like pushing in, we'd be like, what the heck is wrong with this picture? Like, we literally need to see the water flow back
Yeah.
out and back in. And it's that rhythm that leads, I
Mm.
mean, the moon, but like there's that rhythm that slowly pulls the tide out.
Yeah.
And I think for us as people, it's being able to know that there is the ups and the downs and there's
Mm.
the back and the forth, but that we need both. Like we need
Mhm.
the good, the energy that we
Mhm.
get along with the moments of I don't know how much I have left in my tank.
Yeah, no, for sure. And yeah, this like thinking going on like the extreme of that, of if we're in a space where we never like our job, we're never in flow, we're just
Right.
constantly being pulled back. Well, yeah, then that's that recipe for that helplessness, hopelessness, stuck feeling.
Mhm.
It gets hard to get out of bed. We start just like feeling just like, well, nothing matters.
Yeah.
That's not a
Yeah.
fun
Just
space
that
to be
ick.
in. Yeah,
Yeah.
like I wouldn't
Mhm.
want to go to work either. I wouldn't want to put 100% of my stuff into things. I wouldn't be in a good space. And
Mhm.
so we need that kind of that ebb and flow. I like that
Mhm.
metaphor. I'm curious. So like you've even mentioned you've been burned out a couple of times, and
Yeah.
I can
Mhm.
relate to that as well. What do you do to, minimize or prevent
Mhm.
burnout as you've, been on this journey for a little bit?
Mhm. Well, my nice little paper planner, because we all know that
I love a paper
Google
planner.
calendars. I know, like I'll show off mine too, but Google calendars are not the
Oh, it's
same
a passion planner, I
as
think. I
it
love
is a
passion
passion planner.
planner.
I love them. Google calendars just aren't the same as pen and paper, but I have had to literally block off time
Mhm.
for myself. And I do it 3 days a week. And it's different every one of those days because I was running every single time that I blocked it off. And I was like, this isn't, and this changes. But like, I hit a point where I was like, this isn't actually what I need anymore.
Mm.
Because quite honestly, it stopped having the same impact.
Mm.
It was having a stronger impact when I was running regularly, partly because I was preparing for a 10K and I was like, I need to be ready for this. Um, but then I completed the 10K and I was like, I don't need to run every time. Now, what do I need? And so I added in yoga and other types of exercise in those windows. But I had to literally block it off on here because this is kind of I don't know what to call it other than this is the non-negotiable kind of space of if it's written down here, I'm not allowed to change it.
Mhm.
Now, I have times where I will, for example, in the summer, one of my days is Fridays. My kids are with me on Fridays. So in the summer, I am being flexible in the sense of like, well, my Friday is not going to include yoga right now, and that is okay. We will
Yeah.
do other things.
Yeah.
Honestly, my kids will do yoga with me if they want to, so it's not a big deal. Um, or like once a month, I have a monthly check-in with a couple of clients and I'm like, you know
Mm.
what? Like it's once a month. I'm okay with doing that on Friday as long as I also move that time to do something for me a little bit
Yes.
later in the day. So
Yeah.
there's some flexibility there, but it is so important in my mind to block it off and
Mhm.
like protect it.
Mhm.
Like like nope, I'm sorry. Like and I will straight up tell people like, "Oh yeah, I run on Monday morning, so I'd love to be able to see you, but that's the day that I really want to take care of myself." And guess what? It's okay. People
Mhm.
are okay with us saying that we want to take care of ourselves.
Yep, we
I've
are
I've
human.
learned I've learned that when you say that, they're like, "Oh yeah, of course." In fact,
Right.
they want to know that their therapist is taking care of themselves.
Yep.
So yeah.
I love that. No,
Mhm.
I'm with you on like besides the running, because I'm not a runner. So you
Oh,
said
that's
that
okay.
earlier. That's the, polarizing, like, no, not relatable. But I
It's
think
okay.
it's so important though of putting it on the planner or whatever your to-do
Mhm.
list, your Google Calendar, whatever that is. Because if it's written down, we're more likely to like stick to it. Because if I'm like, oh, this week I'm going to do something for myself, and then Monday
Mhm.
comes and I don't do it, I get busy, and then Tuesday comes and I get busy, and Fridays, I'm
Mhm.
like, man, it's the weekend now. But if you put it down, you're like, okay. I tell people to schedule their lunches. So many people do working lunches,
Mhm.
and I'm like, just write it down. Write a lunch break down. And then they're like,
Mhm.
oh, I actually like went and grabbed lunch. I brought lunch to work and I turned my computer off. And I'm like,
Mhm.
good, write it down. And the other thing I loved that she said was you adjust it, right? Like
Yeah.
you give yourself that permission to check in with what you're needing. Some days it sounds like movement, whether it's yoga or running or doing something
Mhm.
with your kids that's physical activity. Maybe sometimes it could be something else for someone. Maybe you've done a lot of
Mhm.
maybe you're in a job that has a lot of like high physical activity and you need rest.
Yeah,
Give
you need a
yourself
hammock.
give yourself a nap. Give yourself
Yeah.
permission to, do something that your body needs. That sounds so
Mhm.
empowering for people.
Mhm. Yeah, one of the it's funny because it's called Nourishing Wisdom. I think it's about more than just eating. But a big part of it is about the food portion of like caring for ourselves well. And it has you before you sit down to eat a meal, you just sit with the question of what do I
Mm,
need right now?
yeah.
And whatever the answer is, it's okay. Trust yourself. Like maybe get past the initial, like, oh, I don't know. I don't want to say anything because if your brain says I need a sucker, maybe you do need a sucker,
Yeah.
but allow yourself to sit with the question for a few seconds and whatever comes to mind, maybe lean into it and go, oh, I'm surprised that that was the thing I thought of, but okay. And try it and see if it satisfied you. And if it didn't satisfy you, you have more questions for yourself. Like,
Hmm.
I wonder why that popped into my head,
I
you
like
know?
that. Yeah. And like you said, like using those similar questions to other
Mhm.
areas of our life. That's just good, like awareness
Exactly.
and insight stuff. I like that. So I
Mhm.
know you offer a few different things for folks who are experiencing burnout. So can you tell us a little bit about what services you have and maybe like how people would
Mhm.
know what's a good fit for them if they're looking for some burnout help?
Yeah. So I do provide therapy services for people in Michigan and Indiana if they are dealing with burnout. I love working with other therapists. That's my favorite thing. But if it's therapy related, that it's specific to those two states. But
Mhm.
then outside of that, I also, and this is new, I don't even know if I told you about this, but starting in October, I'm going to create or launch an 8-person only burnout support group for therapists. I
Oh.
want it to be small. Like it's really important to me that it's closed so that we don't have like people randomly joining. Like you're going to be sharing things and you need a space that you feel safe. And so that's really important to me. It's going to be 3 months long. And it's going to be closed, but that's something I'm going to do in October.
Oh,
Right as we get
exciting.
into election, we're talking, elections,
Yeah.
holidays, even just the winter blues. Like it
Yeah.
was important to me to get this going in October as we prepare for all of that stuff coming up.
Oh,
So
that will be
yeah.
so needed. Oh, I'm so excited for you. That
Yeah,
is
me too.
awesome. Well, perfect timing for
Mhm.
this then, because yeah, we'll get to tell this out to
Yeah.
the world. I'm going to be posting all of her social medias and websites, so make sure to follow and stay tuned for that therapy stuff. I know she does
Mhm.
some coaching stuff as well, and now a
Mhm.
support group starting in October. So y'all follow along. She's good stuff. One of the final things that I like to ask folks is how have you been practicing authenticity in your life lately? And I use the word
Mm.
practicing because it is not always
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah. For me, it is about it's about journaling. I know that that sounds really therapist-y, but um listen, it's one of those where you hear people say it's a good thing and then you're like, yeah, it's a good thing, but then you do it and it is a good thing, but then you feel like you're
Hmm.
just part of that crowd. But I do feel like for me, it is journaling because when I journal, I give myself permission to say whatever I want.
Yes.
Um, I lean into that expression for myself because one, I mean, I'm not saying anything that I'm not already thinking. And so putting it on paper is just giving myself permission to see it
Hmm.
too. And then, I mean, I see a therapist because I think all therapists should have therapists.
Hmm.
And so then it's also a place for me to be like, hey, we may need to talk about this one that came out while I was writing it down. Um, and so I think that that's like the key practice that I
Yeah.
do that helps me.
Oh,
Hmm.
no, that's so relatable. I also see it, or I'm in between now because I just moved. So I need to find a new therapist. But my Michigan therapist was like, do you like journaling? And I'm like, I was a journaler, diary person in high
Hmm.
school. And then like my adult brain is like, well, that's not for me. I don't need it. And then anytime I do it, I'm like, damn, that was good. That was powerful. There's
Yeah.
just something about
Mhm.
getting it out of like here, because like I
Yeah.
said, I'm already thinking it. It's already in my brain. I'm not creating these new things, but it's just
Hmm.
almost like a release of it. And then every time I'm like,
Yeah.
damn it, you were right. And so,
Yeah.
yeah. And yeah, just having that space to be, to allow yourself to just be the good, the bad, the anything that's coming up. That's real.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Ugh. Well, anything else that you wanted to share with folks or just like any final thoughts from our convo today?
I feel like we've covered so much. My brain is like, what did we not talk about?
I know. And I was
It's
like,
like,
it really doesn't felt like it was that long. I'm like, we've been talking for 5 minutes. And I'm like, no,
yeah,
it's, can I get ready for my
it's
session
a
soon?
little longer. Yeah, no. I feel like to me, I always like to end with just an encouragement to people to never feel alone. That every time I hear somebody open up and share something, whether it's in therapy or on a therapist support page or whatever it is, every single time I have heard a version of that story before, not in a way of like, oh, you're not unique, but more so like you need to know that there are other people out there who feel like you do. And it is okay to talk and to seek that support out because you're not alone.
Oh,
So,
yeah, but we're gonna end there because oh, what a message. Thank you
mm,
so much for being here and joining and just chatting with me. Thank you for the work that you do. And it's just so
mm,
exciting to see your practice grow because you offer such good services, helpful services. And so thank you. And thank you, everyone
mm.
else. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. And remember that the world needs the real you. So let's explore that authenticity together.